Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Parks and Open Space Committee meeting of Thursday, September 3rd. And the City of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nation and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. May I please have an adoption of the minutes from the Parks and Open Spaces meeting of July 15th?
So moved.
Thank you. We're good to go with the agenda? Okay, good. So first up here we have on the agenda is a report from EOR, who is, they're actually called Emons and Oliver Resources Associates, and that is the company that has been doing the Stormwater Master Plan for Community Park. And part of Council's direction for this year's budget was to look at transportation plan and or circulation plan and pedestrian connections for the community park. So in front of you, you have the first draft citing and that has been taken to senior management for their feedback. We provided some preliminary feedback to EOR from those conversations from Warren and I, and from what I've had with both planning and development and senior management. First page is just showing the existing archaeological sites as they've been identified, and that was through the Stormwater Master Plan. And some of those areas in which it's not so much that anything's going to be a no-go, it's just a relationship to where something's been discovered that has some significance to First Nations, and how we would have to work with, have somebody on site, an archaeological assessment team to make sure that we're abiding by anything that we need to do in those areas. The second page is the existing conditions, and that is just giving us a brief overlook. And what they're doing first is we're looking at the traffic flow before we start looking at pedestrian connections. So we're looking to see how we can alter the flow within the park to get maximum, just so it's safe and it's fluid. And then we're going to look at how we get pedestrian connections from parking lots to beach fronts to gathering spaces and performance stages, that stuff. So on page 2, you'll see that they've already see straight away that there's a couple of essential missing connections and some crosswalks like we've discussed in the past, Councillor Frass. Page 3 is sort of a breakdown of the parking and the number of parking. They did include, as you see out towards Arbutus Point, overflow parking, which we corrected them on, that is not overflow parking. That's typically an event space and is what is known as the kite field. So you can see that where we have our one-way roads and our two-way connectivity at this time, and where all of our parking other than that is at this time, and give or take the number of stalls. The next page is actually just a sort of a graphic layout of what's within there in the recreational programming and the conditions that are there now. They've since been informed of the potential for the secondary grant that we are seeking and the potential siting of that location. I have conveyed that to the team, as well as the relationship with the Downtown Business Association and their wayfinding signage and the potential for some wayfinding within the park in relation to the rest of the downtown activities. So they're up to speed on all of the plans that are being taken place at this time. So that gives us a really good conceptual layout. Actually, it's kind of neat to see when you look at it from that aspect of what all takes place within the park. Any questions so far?
Yeah, if I may, through the chair. They didn't identify on like programs active and passive and so forth. I was looking for actually locations of existing washrooms, existing parks facilities, you know, the storage for the equipment and so forth, as well as the kin hut and so forth. But I didn't see any identification. Did I miss something, or did that not get identified?
No, they just sort of did the programming that was in there. They didn't actually do any of those structural things. You can see them represented as some white dots. There's some, you know, there's an octagon, there's a rectangle there. I can follow up with them and ensure that they include those things, because it is a good point.
My only comment is this kind of, if we're doing connectivity, we should know where these things are, like the washrooms in particular, and, you know, the Kin Hut, so that we know whether there's pedestrian paths and so forth, and easy and safe access across the different roads. And I think it would be helpful anyways for us to, as well as to help cite the grant application, different buildings that we were talking about. I think we should have that cited on the map in some place. I think it's important.
Okay.
Thanks.
Will do for sure. So the next is just a sort of a conceptual disconnect in the existing connections of coming in off of McCarter, the Corfield and Island Highway intersection, and coming down towards the park itself. They just did this for context. One of the things that they did, if we go on to the next page itself, we start getting into some of the bread and butter. One of the things they did note was that the entrance into the park itself is somewhat confusing. You know, we come down off of Corfield, we go down the road, and we start heading in, and next thing you know, you're in, is it Seaside? Is that what that's called there? The Surfside. Next thing you know, you're in Surfside if you didn't take the left, if you're a visitor, or you're in the gravel parking lot, and you're not actually going, is that all there is here? Is I'm stuck in this gravel parking lot. And it's, you know, is it? And so one of their recommendations was, and you'll see over the next couple of alternatives, was enhancing that entrance, putting in some better signage, and just and improving the flow into the park itself. So this was one of their first conceptual plans, was continuing with a two-way road coming in and out of the area, directly into the park, and they changed the flow a bit. They're cutting, and we've since talked to them about this and said, you know, we want to try to keep existing infrastructure that we do have now and utilize those, and see how we can enhance entrances and that, rather than putting in new roads and going right through a grove of trees and over top of a lacrosse box and that sort of thing, right? And so they're pretty clear on that direction and what we think is best. And then they've proceeded to create sort of a one-way section there that circles around and cuts through the kite field, as you can see. And that was one of the first alternatives that they put forward. And it wasn't our favorite by any means, and nor of senior management, and I don't expect that it would be for you as well. Alternative 1A, very similar again, except continuing out to Arbutus Point with a two-way road off of that one-way section. And again, we didn't feel that it was really creating any extra benefit by doing this, really, by cutting through the middle of that great open space that we do have, trying to get better flow, and we're just creating more intersection spaces here that cause problems. And so again, this wasn't one of our favorite alternatives by any means, but we come to alternative 2. So alternative number 2 starts to paint a better picture, we felt, from a staff perspective. The two, if you look at where the blue hatched area for the entrance into the park, which would be on the south side of the curling rink, is a roundabout, and then a second roundabout after on the north side of the curling rink, heading into the gravel parking lot. So that was some of the feedback that we received at this point from senior, was one roundabout would be more desirable than 2. The first roundabout kind of makes sense on the south side of the curling rink, an enhanced entrance, utilizing again the same sort of infrastructure that we have presently there now. And these are all conceptual. The piece heading off towards Surfside there, and you know, this is just sort of their initial plan. But what's intriguing is the actual one-way road flow of going all the way around out towards Arbutus Point, keeping the existing parking lot that's there, and then having a one-way flow back through the park. One of the comments that was received from planning was, what if that one-way road went the other way? which is really kind of interesting. So it really leads to that down from Corefield, off the hill, straight through, around, and then, you know, talking to the planning team, though, their feedback was, well, the reason of having the flow the way it is now with the one-way coming around, sort of staying with the same flow we have now, is that people can come in, they can see if there's parking available in the areas adjacent to the tennis courts or the sports fields or towards the playground, you know, and the loop is always a great drive, and then proceed on the one-way down along the waterfront past the kite field, and then not finding any parking along there, come to that overflow gravel parking lot. So that it did actually make sense to a certain extent with us when I pitched that idea to them on just a very brief Zoom call to clarify some of our feedback that we had received. Is there any, out of those three that we've looked at, is there any discussion we would like to have on any of that at this point?
Thanks. I do think that this alternative number 2 is definitely a preference for me over the other ones that we saw. I like that kind of idea about thinking about changing the direction of the one-way. I could see some benefits to it as well. The intersection, though, the main entrance, I'm not totally sold on the idea that it needs to change at this point, of having like a bigger entrance or more flow into the park. I think people know already how to access the park. I know it's a beautiful place. I don't think people have trouble finding it. I think it is a good solution, but I just don't think the problem is as pressing as, it's not something I've heard come up as people having issue with it. And I think it's a beautiful entrance as it is right now. It kind of sets the tone too, that when you come off of Corefield, that it's a place to kind of slow down, because it's that hard turn that you make into the park with the two streets split there. When I go to a park too, I'm not necessarily going for a drive to enjoy like the beach view, that type of thing. I'm going to get out of my car and I want to walk and enjoy the beach, but not just enjoy it from my car. One of the thoughts I had surrounding that too is with that the Beachside Drive there. I forgot the name of the road that we have called for it, right along the waterfront. Sandcastle Drive there. So for Sandcastle Drive, I see it as a place why we can drive on it, that it's not somewhere I want to encourage is like to try to get traffic flow down there, which is where I think the one-way traffic can help with that. And perhaps if we were to change the direction of the flow and only had accessible parking down on the beach, so that if anyone wanted to go, you know, if you need accessible parking, you want to go enjoy the beach, but maybe it's from your car to watch a sunset. If it was only accessible parking down there, I wouldn't be so inclined to just go drive down the beach to see if I'm parking for myself, because I think out of like human behavior, probably go to the best spot first rather than, you know, the overflow parking up by the curling rink. Right now, I know myself, I'm inclined to go check out down there. So I think if the traffic flow direction was reversed, there would be more inclination to go park by the curling rink rather than go into the.
So you're saying to continue with the one-way flow would be in reverse to what's presented on here,
and then only have accessible parking down at the beach side. Otherwise, with the current flow, I see it as being an exit point for everybody that enters the park. If I, you know, again, just use my own kind of behavior as an example, if I went down there, was enjoying myself, then it's time to leave. It's like on my way out, I want to have one last kind of look at the beach. I could see that just where then you're going to accumulate all the traffic, and I'd rather see it be like more of a pedestrian area as the beachfront. Like, it's come down to the park, but get out of your car and come explore and enjoy it. And if you can't get close enough to the beach because you have accessibility things to consider, then here's some parking for you there. Perhaps with a one-way as well, maybe we could accommodate a bike lane being in there too, and give that kind of cycling route so that there's less cyclists would be inclined to go on the boardwalk, but they still can go into the park, enter one side of the park, and exit out off the highway near where the amphitheater will be.
And those are great points. And one of the conversations that we did have in this regard was, now there's a lot of space there with a two-lane road. If we make it one way, we could have enhanced areas for drop-off and pick-up, and temporary where you could drop the kids, drop the lunch bag, drop the beach umbrellas and the blankets, and then go to your parking. And I like the idea of that being accessible parking. That's a great idea to, you know, for people to, you know, for elderly and those that are experiencing.
Kind of like, and just as a little bit of like where that kind of philosophy is coming from is the idea that I could be fine with there not being a road along the beach, except for I think then people with accessibility issues would have no way to access the beach. But I see a park being as a place, you know, in a perfect world, it's like you could not bring a car into the park. It's there for only pedestrians to walk. But the reality is we need to get to the beach somehow. So bring your car. But, you know, I don't think we should be encouraging, or my preference would be that it's less encouraged for people to just drive along the beach and more get out of your car and walk.
Well, those are great points, and like you said, the idea of having some drop-off points along there would be further enhancing people to, you know, this is accessible area, but if you want to drop the grandkids off, or you want to drop off whoever or whatever it may be, then that is an opportunity. So we did talk as well about having a bike lane, and they're going to look at that and look at if the potential for putting a bike lane in there. The issues that they sort of saw initially when we just had this brief conversation was, because we have parking on both sides, and how does that bike lane you're having to change? And if we have these drop-off pickup zones, how does that work with a bike lane, a dedicated lane? It's that we don't want to have people to have to change with a bike. So it, but that's why we've hired them to look at this. So.
In response to that, I'd say too, if you have just the accessible parking and you maintain it just on one side, and recognizing too that is reducing, there's, you know, there's a significant number of parking spots that are not accessible there right now that's open use for everybody. But I think in that case, if number of parking spots is an issue, then you look at accommodating those parking spots, like where else can they happen? Just kind of prioritizing as to what is that space used for, and then focusing on that first.
Well, that's great. Thank you. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you very much. I have to say that I was disappointed that it concentrated on vehicle traffic roads as compared to pathways and trails for pedestrians. I'm be quite blunt. I'm not in favor of any extra roads actually in the park. Alternative 2 shows actually the existing road going to, but it actually isn't even going around to the hovercraft pad, or the labyrinth pad is what it's known as now. I guess alternative 1A showed it carrying on. So actually what I did is I took alternative 1A and I said leave that exactly as it is, and then just don't put that the connecting road back through the curling rink parking lot. And my feelings is that it's one thing to have a community park, but it's another thing to introduce cars. And I'm a little afraid, quite frankly, of putting in another loop. I'm one of those gas-guzzling car guys that look for areas to cruise. And I don't get out of my car, I look for areas to cruise, and it's a circuit. And that's what we do, because that's what we do. So this to me is going to give me an area that I can come through with my cruising car type of thing and go through, make a loop, go back out through the parking lot beside the curling rink, and then back out onto the highway, and then carry on to my next cruising destination. So it's actually going to increase traffic into the park because it makes it easy. And I don't even get out of the car, because that's what we do when we're in our vehicle. So I'm afraid of putting any more blacktop in this park, and I'm also part 2 of this formula. I'm not really in favor of, I know the cost of asphalt. We're currently talking about that with the tennis courts. But any roads that we do in town, anyways, the cost of asphalt is huge. And so it is actually introducing another piece of road going from the beach portion all the way through to connecting to either the entrance of the park, and then if we're getting into a roundabout, then we're just talking about more resources. I'd rather have those resources put into more enhancements to the park. I have a million of them that is on our list, and in the master plan that we had done for us already is introduce a whole bunch of things that we can do to the park, and it's not dedicated to making better flow for cars. And I'm really in favor of that. And I'm really afraid that this is going to take the costs away from all the other master plan, park master plan improvements that we want to do to it. Everything that we've talked about in previous meetings and everything identified in the master plan. So basically, as far as the roads go into the park, I'm saying leave everything existing as it is, except for I do say the entrance into the park needs a little bit of work. It's as Councillor Fraz pointed out, it's a 90-degree turn and it slows people down, but what we have to do is we have to slow the people down, quite frankly, that are entering Surfside RV Park and exiting Surfside RV Park, because that's the highway. They come flying out of there and they're actually racing right past our entranceway, and that's a dangerous intersection right there for families and elderly people anyways, because these people are flying in and out. And that's just what they do, but we have to introduce some traffic calming coming in and out of there. Also keeping in mind, I'd like as to improving the accessibility into the park as to the entranceway there. I think that's great. We could do a little better job there. Definitely, I don't want to cut through the lacrosse box as was indicated, or even through our lovely grove of trees behind the kin hut. But the other thing, keeping in mind, as we as council anyways identified that gravel parking lot that is adjacent to Corfield and Nervous Lane. And we, as council, were talking about, what to do with that. It's owned by the city. Should we sell it? Should we retain it or whatever?
That's the little one off to the side there. Just
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
okay,
But
yeah.
it's not identified as a city parking lot as it is right now. Nobody really knows. If you walk down there, you would think that it was actually private property or possibly a part of Golden Dawn Mobile Home Park, which is adjacent to that. So the thing is, but thinking about this further, recognizing that the Brass River Trail connection is going to go forward, I think it's very important that we retain that as a parking lot. And actually, but make it as a parking lot with proper signage type of thing, but as well as making it the new style of parking lot that yourselves and engineering have identified as possible. Like, it doesn't have to be a patch of asphalt with lines on it. It can have the tree islands and stuff like that, little corners to make it look, to increase that green canopy that we're trying for. So I'm saying, as part of the discussion to the accessibility into the park, recognize that we have the parking lot there. We should maybe identify that a little more, because some people will they'll choose to park in that parking lot and hook onto the Brass River Trail connection, or go through the community park, or even best, both. And I would hope then that we would actually have a trail that's actually more suitable going through past the curling ring parking lot, the gravel parking lot. I'm saying we have to retain that as a parking lot. I totally get it. But there's a beautiful walkway that's just grass right now that goes in between the skateboard park, the skateboard park and that parking lot. And that whereas identified here at the end of the gravel parking lot, there's already a gravel pathway. I just think that should connect as a pedestrian pathway along there and hook up close to where the tennis court is and our renowned tree arboretum is there, because that's just a beautiful walk. It's just, people don't take it, but and then people like me in my car. People like walking as well in circles, right? They like to, so they don't have to repeat their steps. So if you can, park down at that end and then do the whole loop around the park without having traffic all racing by. And I have to say, as frustrating as it is, the Sandcastle Way along the beach does slow traffic down, and it's great that it does, because it's a dead end. But if it's not going through type of thing, if you're going through, you kind of go, okay, well, I don't have to,
Well, and the speed bumps are kind of prohibitive as
They're
well.
beautiful, yeah, and
they're
and
solid.
As a car cruiser, I hate those speed bumps,
Yeah.
and thus I don't go through there, so I'm not bothering people with the cars. So that's part of it. So that's my thoughts. I think it should have been more pedestrian oriented, and
So the pedestrian connections are coming.
oh, okay.
So that
Is there? Okay.
So the initial idea is to get the layout of the flow of the vehicular traffic.
Yes.
And to ascertain, to make sure that we have, if we want to enhance the entrance and that sort of thing, and how we're looking at this actual flow. And we're going to continue to provide them feedback. And then once that's all established, then they're going to be looking at where these connections are lost and how to move people through to the various places within the park that we want them to go.
Right, but my only other notice, I didn't see any comments or drawings or lineage here to say where the exit goes past where the new performing arts theater is going to be. There's no reference even to that as being part of the connectivity or circular route and so forth. But,
Right.
But, I'm surprised that they didn't say, like let's make that safer for pedestrians with the crosswalks, da-da-da. But recognize that is a second form of
It is.
egress or exit out of the park.
That'll
It should be identified.
Ravenhill Drive, you mean?
Sorry?
Ravenhill Drive? you
Yes,
mean?
that's right, yeah, because we can't lose that, right, because it's.
No, and that was one of the first comments to them, was like, that needs to be yellow hashed with the one.
Yeah,
going out,
exactly,
and-
yes.
And they were cognizant of that. Sorry? Yeah, and there's side parking along the way, that's right, correct. Okay, good. That's great feedback. Sorry,
Yeah,
Warren.
if I could just make a couple points on it. You know, somebody that through work, I'm down in the community park pretty much every day, and sometimes several times a day. Anybody that's been to the park once knows how to get into the park, but you do quite often see people drive past the entrance and turn around to go back inside. So the comment from the consultant was to make it a little bit more evident where the park is. Whatever that means is obviously still to be determined, but there could be better direction for tourists as entering the park. And the thought for the return road on the backside, or whichever way it ends up going direction, was to reduce the congestion along the waterfront and take the traffic away to the backside of the park, so that people could you decide on a parking space for the day, and they find one, they're set, and then they're done, so that we don't have people driving back and forth along the beachfront all the time just to find spaces. The other point is too that the park is a 365-day park, and that there is a number of residents that wait for the off season so that they can go back down to their park and enjoy it. And in the inclement weather that we have, I would make a suggestion that we do still offer some regular parking spaces along the waterfront for people, but certainly can divert the majority or a good portion of them to accessible, so that, especially during the summertime, because I don't think there's enough accessible parking down there for everybody. So.
Just then to get some feedback on that, the reason why I mentioned like the only having accessible is when you talk about like people going to look for their spot for the day, if you know there is some parking that's not accessible, I think that's where then you have the people just going to explore and kind of check it out. And the way to reduce all that traffic flow of people who might be thinking, is there parking available for me down there? If there wasn't any spots there, then you wouldn't go explore down there. That's where that kind of thought came from, and I definitely wanted to get your guys' feedback on it as well. Because yeah, I see value in it too, and I do like your comments too, Councillor Bryan, how you say about not having it as like a cruising path, because there are the people that like to go and cruise, and they show off their vehicles. They see that with whether it's motorcycles or classic cars, and sometimes just to go get beachside. So yeah, but primarily I wanted to know too, what do you think about if there was only accessible parking there versus having a mix of them or keeping it the way it is?
The numbers that are there now, if I could, is I did some quick addition as 52 stalls that are identified along Beachside, and 8 of those being accessible at this time. Councillor Bryan.
Thank you. Yeah, and to Councillor Fratz, I do like the accessibility, but what my point, where I was going with that is that the gravel parking lot is identified on the parking scenario here. I'm assuming 300, is that 300 spots? Okay.
That's their,
rough and dirty.
because it's not delineated as in
yeah,
spots.
yeah.
It's a plus or minus.
Yeah, so where I'm going with that is that I think if we actually could take the money from the infrastructure instead of putting in roads, actually taking that parking lot and turn it into a proper delineated lined parking lot, all with the proper tree canopy, as I'm apt to be going for now, but make that as a actually accessible parking lot with an accessible path off that. Like right now it's just gravel that heads over towards the labyrinth pad, but people with accessibility issues, they just need a place to park their vehicle type of thing. And then if the pathways and the trails, they want to get out and they want to roll, they want to push their walkers, they want to get out, they want to move. But as long as that trail is turned into it has to be pavement of some sort, the concrete or asphalt, from that parking lot to there, then they have lots of spaces for accessibility type of thing. And then they can actually do the whole circuit on our new and improved pedestrian all accessibility pathway. So I think that that is going to be a big plus for that. But it's actually identifying that parking lot as, and I already had looked at landscaping, gridlock pavers, there's a proper name for them, the ones that, permeable, they're made out of recyclable material instead of like a solid surface on there. So it's good for drainage, and it's good for, you can choose whether to plant in it, the ground cover, or choose to just leave it as gravel in between type of thing. But the thing is that they're still accessibility approved, because they have enough grid anyways that the wheels go on it. So I think that we should look at identifying that parking lot as huge accessibility for lots of spaces. As Warren mentioned, there's not enough. But as long as it's hooked into a trail connection, that's obviously coming at the same time. And there's only one other point I had on. And that's my idea for now, is just take that money and actually use it for the infrastructure. We need that parking lot for overflow, but I think it's time that we do something with it, because it looks like,
Can I ask you, Councillor Bryan, then, so with that, are you suggesting that Sandcastle Drive then would only be a pedestrian road? Is that, or you're saying maintain it the way it is currently?
Yes, maintain it because it already has a road or a pathway. That's where the extension of the boardwalk carries on along adjacent to it, which is good. It's wide enough.
I guess my question
Yes.
is though, how are your feelings around if the parking that was on Sandcastle Drive were only accessible parking spots?
I have a problem for that, making them only accessible, only for the fact that as many people need to use the parking lot as well, that are not necessarily accessibility stickered, labeled, really. And the thing is that, but they have, they've had HIP operations and stuff like that, but they're not necessarily. The thing is that I think it's segregating it to a point where you're actually going to, as Warren has mentioned anyways, everybody in the community comes down to the park in the off season. And I still want them to have that ability. I think it's fair to put in a fair number and so forth, but my proposal for the gravel parking lot, it's a huge area type of thing, and as I say, as long as the access in and out of that is accessible, the people with accessibility issues would be totally fine with that. Totally fine.
Specifically, we look, if I may, with the 52 stalls along that area and only 8 being, I'm sure if we, even if we went in half of that, would definitely make a huge impact.
Yeah, again, that thought for myself, it comes from the idea that even if there was half of them, you don't know how many would be available. So anyone who's looking for a spot is still going to go explore the area with the hopes that there might be one. So it's, to me, it doesn't make a difference if there's 12 or 20 or that type of thing. Of course, the more parking, the better for those who need parking. But then when it comes to reducing traffic, if it's available, I think you'll still get the people going to explore it. And if it's not available, if I knew I didn't have a spot available for me, I wouldn't go down there looking for a parking spot. I'd park in one of the larger parking lots there. So those are the problems that I think we're trying to resolve at that. So, and still with that in mind too, like alternative 2, I think still speaks to what Councillor Bryan is talking about, but I think what you're saying is like, instead of it being a driving path up to there, that, that path that they're having could be a walking path, a pedestrian path, rather than a vehicle path that connects onto Sandcastle Drive.
If I may?
Yes, please.
Yes, and also with that path there, it's showing clearly with where they're proposing the road anyways on alternative 2. They're showing that road, it's actually running adjacent to the kite field and adjacent to the fence line that is shared with Surfside. So the thing is that, but in this area in here, and which bothered me a little bit, is when we have the car show, it's a hollow down there where the trees are right at the very bottom, and it's actually, it stays wetter, I guess, than any other area, which to me is not a bad thing, right? So the thing is that I've always looked at that to be a perfect place for a pond or a fountain or anything like that. And so all of a sudden, if you're putting a road there, we're cutting off a portion of the park that has some feature, some value. in future type of thing with a road, with a accessible trail or pedestrian trail or sidewalk, that's not a problem. But if you're putting cars in between, then you just broke up that whole green space type of thing. And if, like I've envisioned to make that a lot more part of the park than what it is right now. And also to provide some screening along that fence line in between Surfside. Surfside is an expansion of their RV sites now type of thing. They're all the way down to that area now. So the thing is, I think some proper screening would be appropriate, some green canopies and so forth. But I think to do that, so if there's a road going into it, it's going to actually get right in between it. And there's nothing worse than having a car cruising through it. Thank you.
The area that you mentioned there that is some of the feedback we received is, as you know, how that on alternative 2 is where it sort of jogs around that area, was to run the road right along the PL, right along the property line. That boggy, wet lower area is actually, we'll have to see how the stormwater management plan comes out. This is probably going to be a detention area for stormwater at this time. So, and the best part of this is, it's a benefit for us in utilizing these the same consultants, as they're very aware of what's going on with the stormwater and the water mitigation plans. So they, yeah. Okay. The next page is just another iteration. I don't know if we need to go any further into that. It's just basically the same thing with we're moving over the parking lot farther towards the PL line there, away from the actual skate park. Sure, please.
Yes, I had a question on, I guess it's the second to last page. I don't have numbers on it. Where it's showing adjacent to behind where the park's equipment is, it says Beachside Drive Pedestrian Connection. So my question is that is going to back in behind Park Sands? Is that the name of the trailer park? Is it Park Sands? Park Sands Trailer Park there. Do we already have right-of-way on that?
No, we don't. So this was just a potential connection
Yeah,
that they...
I like it. It's a great idea.
Yeah. At this time, I'm not sure if it's something we're going to explore within the context of this. It is private property through there. And then farther along with the portion that is the city property, the extension of the Beachside Drive, with potential for that lot next to Park Sands. We're not sure what's going on there just yet either with the development applications.
Yeah,
so
as my understanding, the city of Parksville did own the part in between.
There is that small right-of-way that...
Parksville Beach Motel is, which is kind of being demolished right now. So they did own that, but as I understood, they sold a portion of that to the new owners of IAG company. But I was just wondering if they retained a right-of-way that's going to hook up to Beachside Drive, and that's why my question was, I saw it on here, and I thought if they retained, I mean, maybe that's going to be negotiated with the new development. But,
that I don't know.
Yeah, and that's because it's, favorable for both cases. But I just saw that there, and I thought, oh, that, so that is something that if it went through, it would have to be negotiated through private property.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. And then the other option they did explore was some outlook opportunities along 19A from the downtown corridor, looking down onto the park itself. So some connection back to the downtown, which is really probably some low-hanging fruit. Really, we do have one little platform there now where the stairs do come up, and there's at the top of the ball field, and then potential for another one at the other end to enhance and have people, whether we have benches and some interpretive signage, that sort of thing, and again some connectivity to up top, and as there's a pedestrian control signal right at that location as well. So they were just sort of throwing these ideas out as well. I think do we have any more feedback from anybody on where we're at here?
Go ahead.
Councillor Frost?
Okay, the only one now that we're on to pedestrian connections and that, we had mentioned about that intersection there before. I just want to share my thoughts on it. Is I know right now it's two perpendicular crosswalks, but I think the park, the way it's used right now, is as a pedestrian-friendly park, and I've never seen anyone have issues. Kind of they step out on the road at any point, cars are happy to stop. They expect children and people coming anywhere on the road. I think that corner, if it was just a right of way for pedestrians, because right now it is used corner to corner. People don't use actually the crosswalks. I know it might follow regulations and that to have those crosswalks in that manner, but if it was like a pedestrian intersection or just knowing that it's a pedestrian have the right of way. The other spot I'd mentioned it before is a spot where I thought deserves a kind of a crosswalk, but maybe it doesn't need essentially a crosswalk, but just a curb let down, and it's directly across the park. There's a
From the playground.
From the playground, that's right. There's parking that's adjacent to the playground there, and it has a pathway that you can access the playground, but if you're coming from the sidewalk around the tennis courts, around the center arboretum with the island, there isn't a letdown until you get over to the washroom. So when you're coming from that side of the road, you have to then hop the curbs and that. And I think if there was a curb letdown directly across from where that pathway connected, it would allow that traffic flow. And like I say, as it is right now, people are already connecting through there. Cars are happy to stop. It's just difficult to get off that curb.
Please.
I think because you'd brought it up before, that is one of the things we asked the consultants to look at. And it may be that may end up being too close to the other crosswalk, but that doesn't mean to say that we couldn't put a letdown before that and then put a sidewalk on the back side of that parking, because there is no sidewalk there, and then that would bring them into the playground. So they're looking at that exact connection as well as part of this too. So.
That's where I just worry that, like, from a consultant's point of view, they're looking at the technicalities of, here's a crosswalk, and if we establish another crosswalk, it's within this proximity. And we're saying, does it really need to be a crosswalk? Like, if we just have it as a letdown in that spot, the whole entire park is kind of used as a crosswalk as it is. So, but a letdown even in the vicinity somewhere, I think would be a benefit if that was the kind of compromise. One other thing too is right now the curling rink parking lot, they identified it as needing an accessible some pedestrian connection from, they say, like the gravel parking lot past the volleyball fields over towards the food truck stand areas. I think that's a reasonable alternative, but as well, if that sidewalk around the island was a complete sidewalk, then it would give the same use, because as it is right now, I see people park in the curling club parking lot, and then they have to use the road to go over to the washrooms and that. There's no other way except for going across the grass, which isn't always an option. And that would probably be my preference, would be to see the sidewalk go around the entire island, so that you have this kind of choice of how you want to explore the park there around the tennis courts. And
It's funny, thank you for that. I looked at that just as recently as yesterday. The only, I think, hinge that would be on that, so if you go back to almost the very beginning, the pedestrian existing conditions and pedestrian connections, and the main missing that they have, and the essential missing connections that they've identified there, is that one from the gravel parking lot going along on the south side of the tennis courts. The problem with going around the Arboretum is there are some significant trees that are close to the actual Sailor Sea Drive roundabout through there that might be compromised with us trying to put in a sidewalk. I had a pretty good look. There's a significant fir tree. There's a couple of there's a weeping birch, I do believe, or a beech, and a couple of significant trees in there that because I looked at it, I went, okay, this is pretty straightforward, and it's going, maybe not so straightforward, but there is things we can do to mitigate route conflicts and infrastructure and as such, and it doesn't have to always be concrete, does it? So there's opportunities to create bridges and that sort of thing. So it's by no means would it be completely out of the question. I just wanted to bring those facts forward that I don't know if that was part of the original design intent or if it just sort of morphed into that. But because it does look, when you look at what we have here now laid out with the connectivity, there was no intent for that to go around, and whether that was because of existing conditions, yeah. But your points are well taken, for sure. Councillor Bryan.
Thanks, Guy. I agree 100% with Councillor Frass's estimation on where the crosswalk should go, and in particular that intersection anyways where we have a crosswalk on one side and people are actually going kitty corner, they're going corner to corner. We've seen very successful done in other locations where it's actually a block crosswalk. It's all four corners.
Yes.
So all four corners are all cross-hatched all the way through. So it's a crosswalk in every direction, including diagonal.
Yes.
Which makes it the pedestrian friendly that we want.
One big area
Love
perhaps
it.
even in there, yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
know this town of Steveston, the village of Steveston has those, and they're fantastic.
Yeah, they have it at Whistler as well, type
Yeah.
of thing, and
Oh,
it's
okay.
just to cut through, it just makes it, everybody knows pedestrians could come from any direction, and it gives you a much better feeling when you've got young ones that have a tendency to wander. And I think that's a great idea with around the existing curling rink parking lot, because I see people actually going through the parking lot as access to it, and so you're always aware of cars backing up and pulling into spots. So I think that's a really good idea as well that Councillor Fraz put through. Recognizes, of course, too, anyways, the Raven Hill Drive Road. Raven Hill going up past the Performing Arts Theatre and the ball field at that particular point. There's going to be a real pressure we've identified as council anyways, that we have to somehow get connectivity with the park to downtown. And so we're constantly looking at new ideas anyways to get the people down. We've, as you've already identified, we already have a few lookout areas and spots and so forth that I totally envision being incorporated into Raven Hill Drive, but then right on 19A, that's where we want to slow down the traffic. That's where we want to get the people to quit treating it like a freeway. So that could very well be, we're talking about entrances to the park. As far as a pedestrian entrance to the park, that could, I hope, will be identified as where the pedestrians are going to get into town and into the park and vice versa.
You mean the top of Raven Hill there?
Right, the top, yeah, it's actually not at the top of it. I walked through it, and it would actually be adjacent to the Dairy Queen. The Dairy and McCarter Street, anyways, is where it is going to be the perfect location. Otherwise, it's going to end up in the middle of the Shoppers Drug Mart parking lot, which is not a good thing. I mean, if this would be really good for Dairy Queen, not as if they need the help, but anyhow, to be identified that as the entrance to get people up into downtown and vice versa. We're solving a few things. So just keeping that in the back of my mind that we're looking at things like that at council now as well. I mean, we're a long way off, but it's just an idea. We have to connect downtown with the park, pedestrian-wise.
Question for him.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
If I may, could you explain though, again, I'm just trying to get a picture of it. I realize what you're saying right now, there's a crosswalk across McCarter there, and then it comes to kind of a landing place. There's a bench there, or is behind the baseball diamond caging on that hill? Is that, and how would you envision the, because we're looking for like a accessible slope then, would it kind of be a switchback, or what would be the?
Yeah.
It is. Yes, there's a name for it. When you do a switchback, it would have to be excavated where that lookout is. There's a bench already sitting there, type of thing, and going down that slope. But there's lots of room on the slope side behind the baseball backstop at that particular location. There's an awful lot of room that we can do that switchback to make it, curvy. Everybody likes curves, all the way down type of thing. That would be accessible. The grade is going to be impossible to reach the proper grade that they say is for accessibility, but those rules are being changed right now as we speak, because the thing is that most people that have accessibility issues now are now using power scooters, power bikes, battery powered, all sorts of devices that are up and coming right now, which is awesome. So the thing is that the grade is not going to be such an issue. Like before, they proposed putting in it's an elevator, but they call it a funicular. Funicular, which is huge expense. It's $1 million. So the thing is that now with people providing their own motorized devices, and you see them all over town, which is fantastic. We even have battery-powered bicycles now that I see people riding, three-wheeled battery-powered bicycles. Fantastic, these people are getting out. So that slope is not going to be the issue anymore as far as I see and yes, that's the location. And then you have me with my huge crosswalk going right across 19A.
Woo.
Oh yeah.
Good.
Engineering level.
Well, and that's great to know that, having some insight that, as you can see that on that one thing, when we look at the pedestrian connections, they've identified that where there's the paths or access is greater than the accessible slope is currently at this time. So, and we have had conversations with them as well about this and connectivity and how can we get more than the only actual way to pedestrian now is to come freewheeling down Ravenhill, down those stairs, or from the other side off here by Corefield, right, as a pedestrian connection. And some of them are, if you are not on a mechanical scooter or something, they still are a bit of a challenge with the degree of slope that is there. So.
As many individuals have identified to me, they said there's no problem getting down. getting out is difficult. Now when they put the button up there, right?
Great. Excellent. Well, I have some great notes. If there's nothing further, Warren, do you have anything else you'd like to add? We're good, gentlemen? Sure.
It's now, as long as you were still discussing the things,
Yes.
but off the pedestrian side, I'm just looking at the next kind of page was about the lookout, or outlook they call it here. I don't know if we were going to move on to outlook kind of things.
Well, that was just sort of an enhanced opportunity again to connectivity to the downtown.
Because this to me is like the outlook kind of touches on what Councillor Bryan was saying about you have that pedestrian entranceway, and outlook seems like a great way to like present that, to have that pedestrian spot, gives a nice lookout. I recognize here that we have kind of two of them offered as a possibility there. So I have a couple of thoughts of feedback, but I wanted to see if that was something that you guys were going to introduce or kind of get your thoughts first before I share a pie in the sky ideas there as well.
No, go right ahead.
So one thing that I think is really unique and wonderful about Parksville with this hill is, and this would be, I think, leaning towards more the other outlook towards where we currently have like that community sign right now, the signboard there. Parksville right now is already used as a sledding hill in the wintertime. You see it all the time. People come out there, but then you're kind of limited to the street side. We block off a lane for them so that they get that kind of space from the cars. But what I think would be a really cool idea is to offer that same kind of thing in the summertime by having an in-ground slide that would, if you had an outlook where you don't have to close off the lane because you have that space for private and safety, an in-ground slide, you don't have as much safety issues as the height, but it would be one of the biggest slides that you'd see on the island. It's kind of get your family out to have some fun. On that end of the ballpark, you're not behind the backstops of things where you're have people playing. And I think if you did it as a double barrel slide, it brings the opportunity of like you and your partner or your children, that type of thing, to have that connectivity and have that fun. So it's kind of this wild idea, but I think I want to throw it out there.
Interesting. I don't know if it's pertinent to the connectivity and pedestrian flow plan that we're after now, but I totally. It's a quick way down. Yeah, it's a quick way down. Thank you.
I love the idea. And then I think it's great. You say it's kind of out of this world ideas type of thing, but these are what we need. And the thing is that they take advantage of that. And my only comment would be is that would have to be probably in addition to the slowdown of 19A right there, because the city very wisely block off one lane when the kids are sledding down there in the wintertime, which is just fantastic. It makes it for a very safe time, fun for all the families. In the summertime, we would have to take that into consideration, but if we put through plans for 19A as to possible slowdowns type of thing, then I think the idea of a slide going down there, we have a hill. Mount Washington have figured out that they have a hill that's only used in the winter, but now they're using it in the summertime. They've got a zip line up there now, and they have people taking mountain bikes up there, and they're actually getting season passes in the summertime to use that hill. Well, our hill is 12 months out of the year as well. The idea of a twin slide or something like that, I think that'd be a lot of fun. And I think actually, if it's done in connectivity to maybe using the available slope, I think it's a great idea.
Look out, Pagosa, here they come down the slide. Oh, that's great. No, and I remember years ago, Grouse Mountain having a concrete tube that you rode in on a little sled, and that was little wheels, and there was pads, and if you push the stick forward, you'd go on the wheels, you pull back, and the wheels would come up, nobody on the pads, you'd slow down, and it was a great, this isn't Grouse Mountain or anything, I get it, but that idea of just that fun way to get down. Now that's definitely not as far-fledged really as it initially sounded. So that's great. Thank you. Any further discussion on the hill and on our plan here? So I've got some great notes that I can take back and flesh out and provide to the consultants. So thank you very much for that robust discussion. Next that we did have on the agenda was a draft survey for Woodland Park and, here we go, Ermineskin? Ermineskin, I don't know. Linear Park. So one of the things that came recently to the forefront was in Woodland Park, we had to remove some trees. Some western red cedar trees, as you know, are failing in our community as they're in the Pacific Northwest. We had to remove them. They were becoming hazardous. And Warren presented, it's a new planting plan. Let's go back in, put some trees back in, start rebuilding our canopy cover. And in our parks and open trails and open space master plan, there's talk of connecting with residents and engaging them through surveys of what they'd like to see in their parks, and what they'd like to see specifically in their neighborhood parks. And so Ermineskin was another one. I'm not saying this right, I'm sure. I had a lady contact me and say, hey, can we have something here in this park? And it's a green space with some trees, and there's a path connecting through to another roadway, and right away the bell went off, and I thought this is prime opportunity for us to go forward and connect with these groups and ask the neighborhood, what would you like to see in your park space? It's one of the key recommendations within the master plan is to connect, and far be it from us to think that we know what's best for everybody, and it's so this is something that we wanted to do. We meant to have here for you a draft survey, and it did not get attached somehow, so my apologies for that. Basically what we were going to look at was have you sort of think about what kind of questions would we pose. So we're doing demographic questions. Where do you live? How often do you use a space? Would you use the space more? Would you like to, in the demographics, is there young kids in your house? What's the age range? Do you want to keep it a green space? Do you want a place to play with your dog? Do you want a place to meditate? Do you want a place to read? Do you want a playground? Basically, the amenities that we do provide as a park system. So that was supposed to come forward, but what we will do is get that out to you very shortly and look for some feedback at the next meeting if that's possible. Please.
Question, Guy, if I could. So is this just for the Ermineskin Linear Park, or are you talking about all parks?
Nope, just for these two here.
So Woodland Park is what, I'm not sure which is Woodland Park. Is that beside the wetlands? No, okay.
No.
So
Go ahead,
if
Warren.
you could clear that.
Yeah, Woodland Park, if you go up past the fire hall on Jensen Road, or Jensen Avenue there, away from the City Hall,
Yes.
up towards Molliat, if you take a left on, I think, Cedar Street,
Yes.
and then you take a right on Woodland, there's a cul-de-sac there. It's a big old executive homes, and the whole center is a park.
I didn't know that's what it was called.
It's a big space with, some trees in it and some trees that have been planted. I think there's a bench, and I don't know if there's a garbage can. And I've been there 2 or 3 times to have a look, and a few people with walking their dogs in there, sort of thing, and throwing a ball for their dogs. But the area just, to me, is asking for something to be put in there to provide to the residents in that area. And looking at it going, when we look at our playground distribution within our master plan and the idea of within 500 meters, we want to have a green space for people to recreate in or visit, and have an equal distribution of play components within our community. Both of these areas are prime for that, along with our discussion of Marks Park previously, which
Right.
we're going to continue down that road. But, I think as we these just came forward and were presented right now, and it was just, it really was, you know, strike when the iron's hot kind of idea, and then go forward as this committee, sort of as we find our way, and go through these engagement surveys and start to reach out to other areas and see if they want to have enhanced spaces within their community.
So this is in addition to Ermineskin Linear Park, that's a separate one?
Correct.
And that is not a linear, that's a linear park, it's not the wetlands?
No, it's actually, a lot of the parks have colloquial names that we just call because of, you know, past history, and they don't have standardized names, which is something we could possibly look at in the future, but it's a rectangular park. It's on Ermineskin Road. If you're going up Hearst towards Wren's, just before you get to the corner,
It runs into it.
if you turn left into Ermineskin there, it's right there. Yeah.
Okay.
It's just a couple of lots, basically, that were given up during time of development,
Yes.
probably the 5% in, you know,
Right.
dedication of land.
So they're both, is what I call linear parks then, you know, like it's.
Yeah, neighborhood park, you know,
Right.
I don't know if there's much linear. Yeah, it's a big
Yeah.
square, you know, it's probably a couple acres.
Okay, so then, your survey would just be neighborhood addressed, or is it
Correct.
going to be all, yeah, okay.
Correct.
Just that particular neighborhood?
Engaging the residents within, you know, that 300 to 500 meter kind of circular, and seeing what they would like to have. And
Yes, I like the engagement process. The wheels, they're turning here. The wetlands part that we have acquired as well. The only thing, I thought this was referring to the wetlands, and I'm tired of calling it the wetlands. It's just really not too romantic a name. So the thing is that I was thinking that we need a new name for that, and it shouldn't have anything to do with Ermineskin. It's just confusing and hard to say, apparently.
Ermineskin.
So the thing is that, is there any merit to asking as a survey of what I'm saying, making it a little more globally for all of city of Parksville about the wetlands, or do we want to go
Well,
there yet?
that might be for another time
Okay,
and another, yeah.
Let's just keep it small.
I think so.
Okay.
I think this is a neighborhood sort of,
Yeah.
you know, if we start getting into overall, we have recommendations in our parking, you know, open space trails master plan.
Right.
For when we talk about the wetlands. You know, we've had a couple different studies done on it by both, I think the Aerosmith Biosphere did one.
Yeah, we did have a community engagement session at the wetlands. The geology class, I think it was, from VIU hosted a session there. So we had a lot of the neighborhood out, and we talked about different things there. Aerosmith Natural Society, I think it is, has done a plant inventory for us. We have bird inventories in there as well. So that's a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, getting down on the educational signage for the park, so that we can address those things. But a lot of the park is just kind of a passive use. It's about establishing the connection trails so that people can walk through, adding in some benches at strategic points, and some garbage cans as well.
So we'll get that draft survey out for you to have a look at and provide some feedback on anything that we might be missing for question-wise, or what you think would be pertinent to bring out to the neighbors. And that takes us on to new business, and I had something that I wanted to run by really quickly with the committee in regards to the Memorial Avenue elm trees. We're all familiar with the Memorial Avenue project that's going to be coming up in the next little bit. Next year, I do believe, is when it's scheduled to go forward. There, we had another arborist report done, and this was done, and we knew we needed to have another report done. The last one had been 5 years. I recommended to our engineering partners, a former colleague of mine who's very adapted in the world of urban forestry and doing assessments of trees. And so he's come back with an assessment that's concurred with a couple other assessments that we have done, that is recommending the removal of 3 of the trees due to moderate and high risk rating of failure. So we wanted to get that out and plant the seed, there are 3 trees that we are going to need to remove. There's another 7 that need to have further investigation done, both, there's 3 or 4 different levels of assessment undertake. One is a visual assessment that you can do just by standing at the base of a tree. A second is you start using a mallet on a tree, you start investigating the crown and the roots, getting into the root flare, more intensive into the canopy. And then a 3rd level is we actually start drilling into the tree and finding out if there's any punky wood, what's sound wood, what's not, and then getting up into the canopy itself, looking at branch attachments, looking at the inclusiveness of bark, and looking for failure and potential stuff we're not seeing on the ground. Trees will show various issues in different ways. So, and these are old trees, and for the most part, they're in very good health. You know, they're in good health. They need help, and we've undertaken that over the last couple of years at council's direction, both with mycorrhiza treatments. We've water and fertilized and given them supplemental that way. We've done some decompaction of the surface between the sidewalk and the road, where we've come in with a unit called an air spade that actually opens up these compacted soil pores and allows water infiltration and CO2 and oxygen to move through. There is also we need to do some more inspections as well, and or some big removing of branches and end weight branch reduction on some of these trees. They need some attention, and we wanted to bring this forward to the committee to plant that seed, and we have a council meeting coming up, and let you know that this is where we're at, and we need to start taking action shortly. This isn't the result of this, and one of the things being that we did not want to have it the result of the project. So this is current conditions as it stands now, and we need to give them some TLC and really, you know, more so than what we have in the past, and which we are doing now, and we do need to remove 3, and they are a hazard. Please.
Thanks for that, Guy. It pays to have another set of eyes on these trees as well as the elms. Just to refresh my memory, how many trees are there currently?
34.
34. And so we're talking about 3 are definitely, we feel that and when they're to be removed because they're considered to be a hazard, and to this new project anyways, they're just going to be a hazard to the area.
Well, so they're at a point now that we need to deal with them prior to any. A lot of times what you would do coming into a project is do an assessment, because of the ground disturbance can cause issues with branches in a tree and the stability of a tree, and so a lot of times they do that before. In logging operations, that's very and one of the first things they do is look and see what kind of levels of ground disturbance will be in there and what trees will be impacted by that. But we're going out and assessing quotes right now. We need to take these trees down for public safety.
So then the plan is then to incorporate into the new the Memorial Avenue restoration is to replant new trees to maintain balance. Is that correct? So would we replant with elm again to maintain that? And so that's, yeah, and it's so. Yes. So you get the largest elms you can get type of thing. You don't get the little the little seedlings, and so that's the idea. Yeah. So
we'll get what we can too,
yeah.
Right? And see, and you know what? A lot of times it's you can plant a 7-centimeter caliper tree that'll grow quicker than a 13-centimeter caliper tree, because when you spade these large trees out of the ground, it's such a shock to their system, and they lose such a vast volume, a mass volume of their fine root hairs that do a lot of the work. These fine roots, that it throws them back quite a few years, where with a properly cared for and dug 7-centimeter tree, you know, we can get, you know, a rapid amount of growth out of those. And like I said, there's 8 trees there that have prescriptions on them that we need to look at as well, and remove end weight and some large scaffolds, and then 7 that need a further level 3 inspection. So
I think that's great. Yeah, good work. Yeah, to take care of the problem before it becomes one.
Yeah. So we just wanted to make the committee aware, please.
And then one of the considerations, I think, with any trees that need to be removed is if that wood can be repurposed into something like a archway. I think we mentioned before about the project there too, if it can be done into something to still keep the wood and the value of them there.
Benches, signs, you know, there's all sorts of stuff, and sort of good precursor into Warren here has some ideas, and he's reached out to a few folks, and just there's many artists in the community, so.
Yeah, it just was because these trees are being removed for Ganoderma, which is a fungus which causes rot in the tree. So there may not be a lot of really good wood in it, but we'll have to wait and see when it comes down, and that'll determine what we can use the wood for. But I did reach out to a friend that is a wood turner and talked about turning bowls, and there are things that can be done with it. We can perhaps partner with the MAC and get the wood out to local artisans who can then maybe carve or turn or do whatever with the wood, turn it into artwork, and then perhaps maybe auction it off to raise money for the MAC, and then it could be a benefit to the community as well. So there's lots of different ideas going out there that we certainly would love to get input from people of what to do with the wood. So,
And we'll know more once we unfortunately have to lay them down and see where we're at. So as I said, we're just at the beginning phases of going to solicit quotes to have this work done, both the printing prescriptions, the removals, and to do some assessments and to make sure that there's not more that need to come down or that will be at risk during a process. All right. Okay, gentlemen, if there's nothing else, it's under new business.
Under new business, just I'd like some comments from the committee here, anyways, to the Rath River Trail connection. I'd just like to know if there's any further progress on achieving anything on it, and if we as members of council can push further. Our budget negotiations are coming up very shortly here. We're coming into fall 2020. So the thing is that we understand that the Rath River Trail connection does qualify for the gas tax refund, which we are sitting on a fair bit. And I just wanted your comments on what is from the Parks Department, what you need from council at this particular time. My thoughts are, we've installed a little bit with the connection going over the river, with the access over the river, but then we said the Parksville has already had the forethought to acquire the land necessary from Nervous Lane and from the parking lot I discussed earlier, all the way right down through the Englishman River. And my thoughts are, if until when we get that approval to go over the river, I think it's a very worthwhile endeavor to get that trail built. And as such, and is it something that we could include in our budget for 2020 fall, and actually have it terminate at the river for this particular time, and it can be connected with a bridge on the other side. But I'm kind of surprised that Parksville, as compared to other Canadian cities, we have a beautiful oceanfront beach that surrounds us on one side, or surrounds us, borders on our border, but at the same time we don't really celebrate the Englishman Rivers that much. Any other town you go to, whether it's Calgary or Edmonton, they're all very much in favor of creating pathways along the river. Ecologically friendly pathways, I have to say, but at the same time, to celebrate the fact that we have a river, and it is still a major river, and at that far end where it actually terminates, where our land terminates behind Shelley Park there, not Shelley Park, the Shelley Road, it's a great area. And so, with some picnic tables and so forth, it would be a great place for families to picnic along that area as well. So I'm just thinking, is there any way that we could advance just the Parksville portion of the trail along there? We've got it all there. It's in the budget. Is that a big headache for you guys, or you just, or is it something that we can kind of say, well, if the money's in the budget, it's just a contract that has to be let, and I think that's all it is. But in keeping in mind that you've got a few other things on your plate too. Is it something that we can move ahead a little faster?
Okay. Warren, do you have any comments on that?
Just, it actually has been a while since we've had a lot of detail on it. My understanding from engineering is that there is a land swap with the provincial government, with Nature's Trust down there, that the pathway is too narrow in one of the sections. And so they were looking to do some sort of a trade to establish that right away through there, but that hadn't happened last I heard. It was stalled out with the province and Nature's Trust.
With engineering.
Well, I think engineering has done their best to move it forward, but there's been resistance on the other bodies, the province and Nature's Trust.
And that's my understanding as well. So the acting director of engineering, Joe Doxia, and myself met with the RDN and the province, actually with the Ministry of Transportation, about this exact topic. It was 3 or 4 months ago now. And this was one of the holdups at that time, as well as the whole connectivity on the other side was, but I understand what you're saying is, okay, well, that's there. What can we do on our side, and how can we leverage along the river and engage? And it's definitely something that I can bring up to senior and see if there's some direction that can come from them to council to provide some leverage.
Which is fantastic, and it was already due. I do recall though that he had mentioned anyway something about the Nature's Trust.
Yeah.
We recently have, from council point of view, received some information back from LT about the difficulties for the rest of the Greenway project, and they were at this time sum it up, they said there's no plans at this time to lift the Palmer Road.
Yeah.
Park, anyways, at that time, there's no plans at this particular time. So we received that back anyways, and so that's just a starting point for us to say, why not?
On our side.
That's,
Yeah.
That's our job, so the thing is that that's what we'll be working in as well. But I'm just saying, in the meantime, we have this beautiful plan, I can see it already here, it looks great.
Yeah.
And that leads right into our community park. So once again, it takes our community park and makes it so that the people can spread out into a longer area type of thing and not be so concentrated and not a very large space, that they can actually get down all the way to the river and back again. So,
And you know, one of your first comments, if I may, Councillor Brian, is it something that we could put into our work plan for next year? And we've had recent discussions, myself and the foreman supervisors and parks and facilities, about the numerous projects that we do have on the go and what's coming up. You know, what's taking place in Community Park and the other grant application that we're putting through, and about us making sure that any projects we take on, we deliver successfully on, and not have to carry over projects, and not to, I think though, is something of this import, though, we might be able to look at some of the planning in 2020 to make sure then get it and let it out, like you say, as a contract, if it's so the wish of council and or senior management. Could we put that into our work plan? Well, we can always put whatever council wants us to put into our work plan. Something may have to come off, perhaps. We're just formalizing work plans again for next year. We really want to be tight with what we're doing in regards to our plans. We want to make sure, as I said, the last thing we want to do is overpromise and underdeliver. I want to make sure that we're coming forward with, you know, what council's provided us the direction to go at, and make sure that we can hit some home runs. So there's a lot going on, but this is definitely something that's needed in the community, and I'm feeling your drive. So we'll.
I was just looking for the date of this one. But anyways.
Yeah, it's been around a while, right? Yeah.
It keeps on, you know,
Understood. Yeah. And you know, and then all.
It wasn't on a tablet, but it was just about that.
Right.
And a stone tablet.
I gotcha. And you know, and then all of a sudden up comes these, you know, and this is before the performance stage. This is before the gathering space. This is before, right? And then keep coming, and it's just about making sure that we can handle all that while operating our regular core duties of keeping the place safe, clean, and green, right? So, well, it's noted. I will bring it up, and I'll make sure that senior management's aware of it, and we'll go from there. Okay. Are we good? Thank you very much for your time today, gentlemen.